Let's start with an admission here. I was a cranky puss person who didn't originally even want to pick up the whole legendary edition of Mass Effect and its remastered original three games in most of their glory because I had convinced myself that my fondness for the original three was more nostalgia than anything else, especially because I'd been burned by Andromeda, and my last foray into the series in recent memory had been reading all the Mass Effect books, which ranged from merely mediocre to, oh my goodness, why was this written? This is terrible. And they ranked low, even considering the normal level of video game book series. Tack on to that my dissatisfaction with recent BioWare, and I was all ready to chalk my fondness up to the company's better days as some crazy person going, but the old days were better, without proper evidence. I mean, don't many of us fall into that trap? Or is it just me? Maybe just me. But when I sat down with the Legendary Edition and started replaying those old games with their new shiny coat, I realized I had been wrong. There was a reason I loved this series. And yes, it had many flaws, many issues, and the flaws got to me because I loved the main games so much. The first game was ahead of its time. The second game is a great action game with even loads more characters that I fell in love with. And the third game is great right up to its ending, and me and my friends still debate the ending. Some of them going, nah, it was the patches that made it a little bit more detailed fixed it. And I go, no, not at all. But that's not my focus here. I loved this series. I loved its universe, its characters, its world building, the designs in it, and many of our adversaries. I have a great time in Mass Effect again. It really was better in the old days. It's not just my nostalgia talking. This was a much better game. I look at my Mass Effect Andromeda beer goggles and go, what did you do to me? I remember why I love this. And because I'm remembering why I loved it, it's time to take a look at one of the ones responsible for making me give up on BioWare in general. Mass Effect Andromeda, let's take a look at probably my biggest problem with you. And Mass Effect Andromeda had a lot of problems. For those of you who remember, there were many controversies, from its whole character creation system being lackluster and some of its employees saying things they probably shouldn't have. And those are just the edges of that little Mass Effect field, because oh my goodness, there is so much more wrong with it under the surface, and even a lot of it on the surface. There were so many graphics issues, oh my goodness. And I remember hearing the counter-argument so much that people were unfairly holding it to the standard of the past, that they couldn't see the good things there. And to some degree, I think I gave those arguments too much credit, because you know what? Mass Effect Andromeda got to draw in an audience from the past games and got to have all the benefits of a pre-built world and fan base to draw on. So you know what? It should be held to the standards of the past, because it managed to fail on every level when compared to the old games. And while Dragon Age Inquisition may have been one of the earlier sick games that let me know BioWare's time was coming to an end, it was really Mass Effect Andromeda that told me the BioWare I knew was dead and gone. So what is this big problem I have with Mass Effect Andromeda that I think poorly compares with most of the BioWare games that came before it? It's actually very simple. Its main character and narrative don't really matter at all. They inhabit a skeleton of what was a majestic world, and you get to see the edges of what could have been an interesting story while not really getting to change anything within it. Your character is basically the AI-enhanced messiah, come to lead these people into a new galaxy and forge a new destiny, and you don't get to alter that destiny one wee little bit. Maybe that would be okay if we hadn't been spoiled by the previous Mass Effect games, or at the very least seen decently crafted illusions that our choices matter, but there is not even a pretense here. It is all empty. Empty as shit! It has a lot of the tropes that we've come to expect from BioWare games, and it's through these tropes I'm going to demonstrate that emptiness and lack of meaning. And it's through these shared tropes that we're going to kind of do a comparison, because let's face it, narrative is not an objective science. The formalists tried their best, but it's not. So I'm going to try and do as objective a comparison as anyone can do, dealing with a piece of art in terms of how we measure its quality. How much enjoyment did I get? How much interest did I have in this? But there are several ways that I think that we can go, hey, this is an obvious step down, and most people can agree. Let's look first at BioWare's tendency to toy around with the Chosen One trope. This is not something that's new inside of RPG gaming, which inherited this trope from many fantasy stories and the folklore and mythology that those descended from. It makes sense why RPGs would see utility in this storytelling trope. After all, if you want to have choices in a game that shape the world, you've got to have a character that matters enough to shape those choices. As a student of history, I can tell you that even with a master's degree, I know just enough about world history and its trends and different conflicting social and material forces that I question how much I think I know about why things happened, and debate whether it is social forces that predetermine things, material forces that predetermine them, or just how much great figures actually did manage to change history. You don't want to have a whole game arguing about that or looking at massive forces beyond your control shifting the world around you while you're just sitting there as a bystander going, wow, you're right, this workers' movement and the shortage of materials is really creating a change here. No, you want to see dramatic, great people doing great things that shape the world, and that's what makes an interesting story. So how are we going to determine your greatness? Well, your character is going to either earn it or have it bestowed upon them on some level. And this greatness will allow you to be that point of change on some level shaping the world. The Chosen One fits. And BioWare games have come by their Chosen One in many different ways, sometimes playing the trope straight, or deconstructing it, or even making you the unchosen one, or a multiple choice chosen one. And not all tropes are bad. I would go as far as to say no trope is bad, it's only its execution and context that matters. Let's take a look briefly at some of these chosen ones that dominate the stories of BioWare. We'll look at relatively recent BioWare. You have Dragon Age 1 with the multiple choice origins, hence why it's Dragon Age Origins. Any one of those characters could become the chosen one, but only one will because of the intervention of Duncan. And even then, you were just a junior member of the Grey Wardens. And the only reason the Grey Wardens mattered it was because it's the time of the Blight. Otherwise, they tend to be shunted to the side by the rest of Thedas and not wanted. Only the fact the Order is betrayed makes you one of the last bastions of hope in Thedas. And while the rest of the world attempts to solve the issue and kill you off, hello Tyrn Loghain, you have to build up support. So by the time you face off against the Archdemon, you have really earned the right to consider yourself the chosen one. In Dragon Age 2, despite my issues with it, you're not the chosen one again at the beginning. At best, your survival only occurs because you become a pawn in a witch's game, who is already predicting her daughter is going to try and kill her off. And then you're a refugee, and your first adventure is just trying to get enough wealth to matter. Then, by the end of the second act, you become the champion of Kirkwall, the champion of one city that's going to be a powder keg for an event that will shape all of Thedas. But this is really the point where you become the chosen one of that story. So you earned it through 2 acts of the game. Dragon Age Inquisition is perhaps the most in-your-face, obvious chosen one, and perhaps the least well-handled. And it's here you can kind of see BioWare beginning to slip. You are, again, the subject of chance or fate, depending on how you view the religious themes of the game, And indeed, the game makes you question these things and gives you no answer, other than that, yes, you got this thing because the villain's plan went awry, and that may have been the maker's will, maybe not, who knows. But you realistically are running the show from the beginning of the game before you have even earned it. And yes, you do get crowned as the Inquisitor, and they tell you you've earned it, but you were running the show even before then. Jump over to Mass Effect, and you have Commander Shepard, who's already a veteran with a back history that you helped shape, who is chosen as a potential Spectre, part of an organization that will give you the autonomy to play a video game like how you want it, but they're not necessarily the chosen one. They still answer to an authority, and let's face it, the villain is actually the chosen one of the Council, their most favored agent, and you don't even achieve Spectre status at first. Your mission goes awry. Nihilus is killed, and you look like you're going to go the way of Captain Anderson before you. Your potential career as a Spectre shit-canned by the machinations of Saren Arterius. It's only after you reveal what Saren really is that you get your chance to show yourself worthy of the office. It's not until the second game where you die that you become a chosen one selected by someone else, and it's because of everything you did in that first game. The Reapers, too, recognize you as being someone who had been able to kill one of their own. And by game 3, you've killed multiple Reapers, so they're a little bit concerned. Before the second game, no Mystic Force had selected Commander Shepard, and Shepard earned the right to be considered by the Elusive Man for Project Lazarus. It's conceivable why he would have put those resources into it after seeing what Shepard is capable of. So in all of these cases, save for Inquisition, it seems fairly reasonable why you're the chosen one. You helped build yourself up, and there were events around the world that made it seem believable that you would be such. Now let's take a look at the positions that allow the Chosen One to make change, because BioWare has always made sure to include the fact that these Chosen Ones inhabit a world full of people with their own agendas, and they're not just going to let the Chosen One come along and blitzkrieg the way things work. Your choices have to meet with the reality of the world you exist in. In Dragon Age Origins, some of the seemingly good and obvious choices have consequences that you may not have foreseen, because in many books, the Chosen One can change the whole social order and everything works out. In Origins, you had to deal with reality. Yeah, it's nice that you wanted to help out those elves. Sorry, there's a lot of bigotry and ancient hatreds going on there, so good luck, Dalish. Oh, you wanted the seemingly honorable traditionalist dwarf who didn't screw you over? Well, that traditionalism's also part of the caste problem that is dragging Orzammar down and is likely to end the last remaining great dwarven city. And I'm sorry, not all of your characters can marry Anora and become the prince consort / maybe king. You've got to be of noble blood and a human. So that door is locked, and you can't conquer those social conventions. Sorry, that's just the way the world is. But the Chosen One status allows you some leeway, some influence. And that influence often means you have to look at an issue that may not be black and white and go, what do I think is the best choice? This can lead you to some of the best moral conundrums in video games. From the personal level of Ashley and Caden to the bigger socio-political ones like that involve measuring the value of a synthetic people, whether you should cure the genophage and potentially deal with another war to extinction right after the Reapers, or even who the best monarch for a nation could be based on what little information you have of them, where you look at their personality and their seeming likability, but also perhaps their ability as a ruler. Now, let's face it, BioWare has limits with its decision-making and its ability to transfer these decisions from game to game and still make it a cohesive game that won't require an insane amount of work to keep up with the potential player options. They've got to make it cohesive, and they've got to prioritize what decisions are the ones that matter and which ones are just illusionary. And let's face it, with the ending of Mass Effect 3, one could argue a lot of them are in the Mass Effect series. And that's something a lot of RPG gamers have had to struggle with. That technology has limits, companies may or may not be willing to put the work in required to make these choices matter, and sometimes the writers just treat choice like an illusion. That's something I've had to get used to with the Telltale series, where it's like, wow, you have all these options. No, you don't. They have a story they want to tell, and most of your choices don't matter. But BioWare manages at many points to make you think your choice matters, even in situations where the changes in that world are largely cosmetic afterwards. And that illusion, the ability to project that illusion, is also important. I mean, let's face it, we're writing about a universe that doesn't really exist. Illusion's all part of it. And when it does make its choices matter, sometimes they're significant, like characters dying off. In their ability to make the choices matter, I think the original trilogy has some work to do. But in their ability to maintain the illusion that these choices matter, the original trilogy did fantastic. At least within each individual game. Now let's jump to Andromeda and talk about the main character and the choices that character can make. Because again, you are indeed the chosen one. But the game, of course, tries to toy with the idea, like all the BioWare games do. You're not really supposed to be the chosen one, Pathfinder. Your father passed it on to you when he saved your life. So some people don't think you're up to it. You've got none of the other Pathfinders around at first. So it seems like you're going to have to make some big decisions, since the Pathfinders are the ones that were going to run this whole operation. And even one of your close companions is a little jealous because she's supposed to be the protege of your father, whose relationship with you was apparently very tense, but isn't really gone into any meaningful detail, so why did it even matter? Don't worry, it didn't. He was just there to sacrifice himself and have a fairly blank personality. My goodness, how could you guys have wasted Clancy Brown like that? I'm okay. I'm over it. I am over it. What makes the Pathfinder special? Well, they're tied to the reason behind the Andromeda Initiative, and they have an AI that merges with them. This allows them to basically sidestep the whole class system and do a whole bunch of shit. And while I question the whole narrative behind this program allowing the AI to be merged with humans and how slipshod all of this lore is put together, especially considering the AI issues in the Mass Effect universe, it provides us a reason for the character to exist and opens the door for a lot of conflict, right? I mean, AI are a big deal in Mass Effect, right? No, it's only going to involve a few minor things where maybe like someone tries to pull the AI out of your head and a few people are uncomfortable with it and you find some logs and you fake dead once and that's really okay. Well, never mind. That's not going to be a major focal point of the plot. It doesn't really matter. It's just the excuse for why you're the chosen one. Got it. But it still gives me a few side quests and nominally seems to matter to the lore, even if really in the central conflict of the story it's basically, well, who cares? Anyway, you still are the Pathfinder, right? But no one trusts you, so you're going to have to earn this and become a hero who is far more than just someone with an AI in their head. You have got to earn people's trust. You have got to make the choices that shape the fate of this new galaxy and humanity. So, how do we earn your place? I mean, I remember in the first Mass Effect spending 2 hours just earning the right to be a Spectre and chase Saren. I remember that you can play up to like 14 hours in Inquisition because of how big some of those zones are and how empty in some cases they can be before you become the Inquisitor. So there's a lot of range there of what you could get up to before you become the Chosen One. You get handed it in the first mission, and by the end of the first planet, they trust you on everything. You get to make all of the major decisions. Well, that came really fast. And all you had to do was show them, hey, I can sort of get one planet habitable because I went in one dungeon. Okay, well, this is still fixable. It's still improvable. Maybe you get to make some decisions that really matter. What about, hey, who do we wake up first? Yes, we've treated this as a dramatic thing. There are people whose family members are still in cryo, and this is a really tough issue where you could make some, okay, scientists or soldiers. Does it matter? No. Okay, well, that decision didn't matter. Maybe some of your other choices. All right, should we let this criminal go or see them punished for murdering someone? So they didn't really murder them, but they intended to murder him. Well, what if we aim for a middle ground between punish them for murder or let them go? Okay, I can only pick one or the other? Okay. Uh, well, I'm sure there are other choices. Make a deal with a crime lord or don't make a deal with a crime lord that has minimal meaning. Really none whatsoever. Okay, but I'm sure there are others. Reveal an Asari's sordid background or not. Okay, well, that's something. Save the Solarian Pathfinder or some Krogan scouts? Well, yeah, this could get interesting. It has only cosmetic meaning? Oh, okay. I mean, it virtually changes nothing. It slightly modifies the ending. And by the way, that was the deepest choice you get to make in the entire game. The one with the most potential meaning. Do you save the Solarian Pathfinder or some Krogan? Well, if you save the Pathfinder, she plays a small role in the ending. If you save the Krogan, I suppose they play a small role in the operation. But either way, you get a talking to, and it doesn't seem to matter even to Nakmor Drak, who was slightly pissed at you and then forgets all about it. I've even typed up most important choices in Mass Effect Andromeda, and I remember all these quests, and none of them mattered at all. They couldn't even create the illusion of my choice mattering beyond a slight lecture. That's it! None of it mattered. You are shaping the entire operation, the whole initiative, seemingly faced with the task to choose what to build, who to wake up, and where to prioritize the operations while fighting off this Ket people and make major decisions, but none of the major decisions matter. It pretty much goes the same way, one way or the other. They can't even fake it. So not only do you become the chosen one super fast, get handed all this powder for no reason, despite the fact there are higher ranking, clearly more capable people who know the situation better than you do, and you're basically nobody, all of the choices matter not at all compared to some numbers that tell you how habitable the planet is. You were the center of the Mass Effect Andromeda galaxy. You make all the important choices. There were no important choices to be had. What's the point of being the chosen one if the chosen one gets to make no choices in a game series that was defined by its pretensions to choice? Now, it didn't always live up to this. Sometimes it did in a big, awesome way. But Mass Effect Andromeda, it's a badly maintained illusion. It's aping old BioWare, and I think this bothered me most of all in the facility where the Ket are creating more of themselves from the local populace, the Angara, and you are left with a choice. Destroy the facility where these Angara are being converted, but potentially kill the Angara still being housed there, or leave the facility standing and rescue the Angara, taking that time. It seems like this choice should matter, shouldn't it? Jaal certainly acts for 5 seconds like it does. Does it? Not at all. No. The loyalty missions, too, make, at best, surface-level changes. I think the Asari arc is perhaps the most important one, where you'll face a choice that might have some cosmetic meaning towards the end. What goes on with PB's friend? Nothing really important. Live or die, doesn't change. Any choices where any of your companions could be killed or sacrificed for another, or in some way make a choice that is seriously questionable and could have massive ramifications for the rest of civilization in the Andromeda galaxy? No. They're really just there to help you along missions and be your cheerleaders. Really, the most important choice you're going to be making in this game is who to bang. I mean, in a Mass Effect game, I suppose that's pretty important, but still, that's it? And yes, if you look into the production history of Mass Effect Andromeda, there are loads of issues, including the fact that the development, let's just say time was used very unwisely, and there were multiple shifts in the production, and the narrative was clearly created in a very short period of time, as was the actual game itself. And it is reflected in all of these massive spaces filled with so very little, and these skeletal characters that range from, wow, you could have been good and have a few interesting moments, to, What are you besides a face and a name, if that? And this is a far cry less than what we see in probably the best of the character rosters in the games, Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 has a few doozies, I will give it that. Jacob in particular, I'm sorry, I'm sleeping. And the two DLC characters, they're a little bit bare bones with such limited interaction that I find it difficult to invest in them, but I at least had a good time on their DLC missions. I think Kasumi's was better. But look at the rest of the companions, and I just see awesome to awesome, each with their own interesting stories. And considering Mass Effect 2 is a game that is occurring on a smaller scale than the first one, it had time to focus on these little things and on the missions related to the characters. They're really the majority of that game. The gameplay in all three of the original Mass Effects, I love. They make the most of what they've got. And even in Mass Effect Andromeda, I still had a great time with the combat. If only anything else had been up to par. What else can I complain about? Well, perhaps only one of the most important parts of speculative fiction in general, the chance to tackle moral conundrums in an environment different from our heavily polarized real world, some of which are obvious allegories for real world issues, some of which are a little bit more different, where you get to go, well, what if? What does this say about me if I make this choice? Mass Effect is full of these issues, and I'd actually like to do some videos dedicated to each individual choice. But whether you save Ashley or Caden on Vermeer says something about you. What do you value in these characters? When you choose whether to spare or kill the Rachni Queen, you are making a significant choice that says a lot about you, and the only reason you were able to make that choice is because you were the one on the ground there with the gun and the button. Do you save the council and perhaps earn humanity some respect, or do you go, well, respect ain't worth shit, it's actually power that matters, and putting humanity in power might help your people out quite a bit more? Even little choices like, hey, what do I do with Conrad Werner? Or how do I handle this mad doctor or this Mass Effect field biotic cult? Or do I target the terrorists or save the hostages? Because you've got to ask yourself, if is he going to go on to do more damage? Can I really sacrifice innocence on that what if? I mean, there's a lot going on here in these choices, and Mass Effect 1 didn't have all the technological benefits that Mass Effect Andromeda had. Mass Effect 2, if anything, ups the ante, but it does so on a personal level as you shape individual lives and their futures. I really would have liked for the base decision to matter more, but there are still choices that do count. Besides just who do you bang. Choices that make you confront both moral quandaries that exist in the real world and ones that could appear or that face you with issues that may have consequences in that universe that could never appear in this world, and ask you, what would you do? Mass Effect 3, it's the frickin' galactic apocalypse, and you have got to make some really hard calls. And even things like the Krogan genophage, which most of the people cured, you're dealing with a species that has been fighting itself to extinction, even with a plague that's killing it off, that shouldn't have rendered them as close to extinction as it did if they hadn't continued to behave as awfully as they did. How much influence can Rex and Eve really wield over these people? Can they really turn them around, or are you just postponing the doomsday clock? Do you want Solarian help or the Krogan soldiers? I mean, fleets are probably worth more than soldiers on the ground. The Krogans really don't have a fleet, but Solarians, they have their own issues at war. And then there are the moral quandaries of, can you consign the people to genocide by curing them? Are you actually consigning everyone else to that? And that's just one choice. Is there any choice like that in the story of Mass Effect Andromeda that has any real meaning? Oh, do I decide to kill some Angar prisoners to preserve this AI? I mean, that could be an interesting moral conundrum, but we've already dealt with stories about the value of artificial life versus organic life in previous Mass Effects, and they did it better. And here it's not even presented as that sort of choice. It's a what's more useful choice. And what proves to be more useful? Neither. It doesn't matter. There are so many potential options in Mass Effect Andromeda for choices of moral consequence that could force you to look at yourself and go, what kind of person am I if I make this decision? Who is my writer for making this choice? Think about it. You are going to a new galaxy that is not your own, and you are changing multiple planets that seem to have some sort of existing ecosystem on them for your needs, presumably wiping out whatever bajillion species wouldn't have been conducive to surviving that new environment. Do we ever really tackle this more than a throwaway line? No. What about the whole potential parallels to colonialism or colonization, even pre-colonialism, where new people move into a new environment and displace or potentially threaten or challenge or cooperate with the existing peoples? Ooh, this game is very scared to even go into that. It's like, no, 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 you're going to work with the Angara. It's going to avoid all the potential moral pitfalls of colonial history. Let's not think about any of that. Let's dodge any potential moral pitfalls here so that we don't have any bad press in our game and deal with some interesting moral questions. What would you, as the Pathfinder for humanity, the Asari, and whatever else you bring with you, do when faced with choices that could hurt the Angara and help you? Would you behave like the colonials of old? Or would you try and build a new future despite it being more difficult? I mean, you could do a very serious in-depth critique of colonial history if you want to handle that. Nah, this game can't be bothered. It won't allow us interesting choices or even face the moral consequences of minor ones like, ooh, soldiers or scientists. Well, that should send a message to the natives, right? Nah, they don't really sweat it one way or the other. And the enemy, though they're not a native species, so you don't have to feel bad about it or even ask yourself any moral questions at all. Are we going to deal with any of these serious questions of merging an AI with a human and the transhumanist questions that come with that? Nah, it's just your excuse for powers. And we'll have a few little story moments that loosely deal with it, but no matter what decision you make in them, it's not gonna matter. The game is so fixated on providing a controversy-free blank slate for the next game that it doesn't make any meaningful choices in this one. And probably because of that, there won't be a Mass Effect Andromeda 2, at least not soon. I think the most damning sign of all that demonstrates, even on a design level, that choice is not but the flimsiest of illusions, is the elimination of the class system. The game is afraid to make you even make a choice early on. It's like the game is so afraid of alienating you that it doesn't make you make the most basic of choices. For a game that gives your main character power over society like none of those before it, even greater than that of the Inquisitor in Dragon Age Inquisition, your ability to utilize that power to tell a meaningful story is less than any of them. Mass Effect Andromeda's story is a skeleton that you cannot graft flesh onto, and because of its poor reception, EA refused to do much more for it either. And considering how BioWare has run things of late, I'm not sure how much hope I have for Mass Effect 4. But if there's one thing it can learn from Mass Effect Andromeda, it's, hey, even the illusion of choice matters. And actually having a choice, that matters more. Please try harder. In the meantime, I'm going to play the beautiful, if flawed, Mass Effect trilogy and remember actually better days. Good luck, BioWare. I know you can never be what you were before, but maybe you'll still make something good. Become something new and worthwhile that I will enjoy investing in.